Welcome to Running Hot, the all-new motorsports betting podcast from Action Network. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto-Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we talk bets for the Pala Casino 400 on Running Hot. Stevie, the Daytona 500 is over. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. takes his first Daytona 500 victory and his third win overall in the NASCAR Cup Series. All three wins coming at super speedways. It was a 40-1 long shot to win. And barring 17 or more different winners, Stenhouse is going to be in the playoffs. So, Stevie, first of all, how are you doing? And second of all, what do you think of the race? And what do you think of that Stenhouse win?
Well, I'm fantastic now. We're recording on Thursday. If you would have asked me Monday, I was exhausted. I mean, Daytona 500 week is just absolutely exhausting. We don't stop with content. I feel like it feels like a month, but it's like 3 or 4 days. So really happy for Stenhouse. Nicer guy in the garage. Love seeing him get the win, but I don't think people realize just how big this win is, right? Jody, first female to get a win as an owner. Brad Daugherty, the first African-American to get a win as an owner. Like this is huge for NASCAR, and the media outlets that like Brad and Jody have done this week, along with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. It's such a huge win for the sport. The race was fine. I mean, it was a Daytona race. I think that we saw a lot of aggressiveness early, and then we saw a lot of aggressiveness late. And I think that's just kind of be how super speedway racing is going to be for this new car. But overall, man, I liked the race. I thought it was fine. I had a great time at the racetrack, met a lot of awesome people. So if you came up to me and said hi, thank you. We had some Action Network people come up and say hi to me at the racetrack. So that was a first. So thanks for listening to the podcast, but I'm excited for Auto Club. I really hope they don't tear this place down. This is one of my favorite tracks. Love these old abrasive racetracks where it's in the driver's hand more than it's in the car's hand. And these are the types of racetracks that I love to predict.
Oh, yeah. No, these races are super duper fun to predict. And we are going to preview Auto Club here, but I want to give my reaction to the Daytona 500 as well, real quick, because I thought it was a great race. Like you said, a lot of aggression early, a lot of aggression late, but even that middle part, there was mostly side by side there. Track position certainly was a little bit important, but to your point about how big that Stenhouse win is for NASCAR, you couldn't be more correct. And also just for Stenhouse himself, because it's been over 100 races since his last win. So definitely very happy that he got in victory lane. But we move on this week, the Pala Casino 400 at Auto Club Speedway in Fontana, California, to kick off this 3-race West Coast swing. Auto Club Speedway, 2-mile D-shaped oval. Like you said, Stevie, it's very notable for its very old track surface. It actually hasn't been repaved since 1996. And what that has done is that aging process made it rough, bumpy, hard on the tires, abrasive. And like you said, it puts it in the driver's hands. So it's going to be a really fun race. Hopefully they are still able to keep this track configuration around, but I know there's a lot of talk of reconfiguring the track or at least repaving it. And that may especially come into play after this weekend because rain is in the forecast. A lot of rain is in the forecast. And with these older tracks, what you will get is because they age and they get cracks in them. If it rains, water will seep back up through the track. So they're called weepers, and that'll make it really hard to drive the track all weekend. So hopefully we don't have to deal with too much of that. But let's get into Auto Club 400. Pala Casino 400 preview here. Tire management, of course, will be key because of the abrasiveness. So Stevie, let's talk about what it takes to be successful as a driver at Auto Club. Are there certain driving styles that work here? What does it take to be good at Auto Club from a driver's perspective?
I mean, at the end of the day, you have to maintain your tires and still be fast. It sounds easy, right? Like it's one of the hardest things to do. And that's why if we look back to like old Atlanta, we saw like certain drivers just dominate every time we go there. We look at Auto Club, we see the same thing. That's because it's really hard to maintain your tires for a longer run and still be fast. So I think we have to look at high tire wear racetracks, not just Darlington and Homestead and Auto Club. They're fantastic, but we can go back prior 2022 because Atlanta is way different now, but we can look at old Atlanta and we could go back and look at some Chicagoland. So we're looking at these types of racetracks for these drivers that not only are fast, but they're fast over a longer run. So we're looking at who's fast in the beginning of runs, who's fast at the end of runs, and trying to find a good median ground of those types of drivers. And I think those are the drivers that, we want to bet top fives, we want to bet top tens, bet to win the race. So, we're going to talk about that more here in a few minutes, but this is a really important type of racetrack because the data is there and people look at just half of the data instead of looking at all the data that we have in front of us.
I totally agree. I'm so happy you brought up old Atlanta, Chicagoland, because one of the drivers that I'm going to be talking about, who I really like this weekend, does have a win at one of those two tracks in his history, and he's been really good at other high tire wear tracks, even some of the shorter ones, like Richmond is very high tire wear. It definitely is about maintaining your tires here while maintaining that speed. So glad you brought up those, because we're not just looking at last year's Homestead, Darlington, and Auto Club. We got to look at everything when it comes to high tire wear. So when doing that, what kind of data, what kind of research are you doing? I mean, you've touched on the specific tracks, but is there anything else in that data or in the research that you're using to prepare for betting Auto Club?
I mean, I'm looking at green flag speed over the beginning, middle, and end of the runs. Loop data. Luckily, like some of the NASCAR loop data is iffy, but some of it's fantastic. And looking at data where we can look at like who's fast in the beginning of runs, who's fast in the closing type of role of these runs, I think that is huge. So really looking at green flag speed. I don't think we're going to get practice. We're going to talk about that in a few seconds here. I don't think we're going to get practice, but practice usually correlates really well with race speed at Auto Club. So hate that we're not getting practice, but there's a flip side to that, and we'll talk about it, how we can take advantage of it on the betting market side of things here in a minute. But I mean, green flag speed is huge. Driver rating at these types of racetracks, I'm going to use it. It factors in a lot of different things that I like as well. So it's doing some of the work for me already. So looking at driver rating, looking at green flag speed, it's really early in the year. We don't really have a ton of pit road data and stuff like that we can rely on. Like this guy's going to gain 2 or 3 spots. We can look at restart speed from last year towards the end of the year and how drivers were performing speed wise at the end of last year. But overall, we're going to really kind of focus on who is fast maintaining their tires over a long run. That's the biggest thing at Auto Club.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm really glad you mentioned practice, because it absolutely correlates so well with race speed. If you look just last year at the drivers that made a 10-lap run in practice and then look at their green flag speed, the correlation between that, so the R squared value was 0.67. I mean, that's like 2/3 of the variance in green flag speed was predictable by 10-lap average in practice. But unfortunately, we're probably not going to have practice this weekend. So that takes a big chunk of data away from us. So we're going to have to manage and deal with that. So let's actually jump into that. Rain is in the forecast. There's a very good chance the field is set without practice or qualifying. So how is that going to impact your handicapping without potentially having any on-track activity this weekend?
So I got a few bets in. I'm being very patient this week. I know we're all excited. It's the second week of the season. We just had the Daytona 500, but first thing I want to preach is just patience, right? If we don't get qualifying, it's going to have this formula to set the field. We're going to have some really good cars starting at the back of the field. Practice didn't dictate a lot of line movement last year, but starting position did. So if we're going to have starting position maybe give us a little bit better value on some of these bets, I don't see them moving in the direction where we're like, oh man, I should have bet that. So getting some of these outrights or getting some of these top 5s and top 10s maybe later in the week when practice or qualifying gets rained out on Saturday, I think is the biggest thing here. And really just kind of relying on who was fast at late intermediate tracks last year and who is fast at, these type of tire wear tracks, and just taking some shots and trying to find some value. And I mean, we did that. We've done some work for you already. We're going to get into our turn 4 picks. So we've done that work for you already, early week value, but pay attention later in the week when we're not here jabbing in your ears. Rain is going to dictate how some of these lines move. So I think it's huge to pay attention to how much these lines move.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things there that I think is very important you preached is patience. I've only made 3 bets so far this weekend. Well, actually 4 now with us doing this podcast, but prior to the podcast, I've only made 3 bets, and all of them, I think, are independent of what's going to happen on track this weekend. So that's the reason I've made them, is I found value in them regardless of whether we get practice or qualifying or not. But absolutely preaching patience. And I'm right there with you. I want to, if there's going to be track activity, I want to see that, because like we said, practice matters so much. But if not, books absolutely reacted a whole lot more to qualifying than they did to practice last year. And in a track where practice is so important, we shouldn't be overreacting to qualifying, especially if it's not even set by speed. If it's set by some formula from Daytona, mostly, we definitely don't want to overreact to that. So right there with you on the patience angle. And you'll hear that theme from me, especially throughout my picks. So one final question before we do dive into the picks. Last year, 12 cautions in this race. It was kind of wild. We had some tire issues, some crashes. What do we expect from race flow? Do we expect similar, or are things potentially going to change this year?
I mean, we started to see the tire issues get better towards the end of last year, but this is not typically a very high caution like track. Like 2008 was the last time we had double-digit cautions at this track before last year. So it was the second race and really the first like big intermediate type of race last year. So I don't want to overreact to 12 cautions for 59 laps. I think we're going to see a lot of green flags racing. I think we're going to see a lot of passing. I think we're going to see a lot of comers and goers with the tire wear. And if we don't get practice, we're likely going to get a competition caution, which teams are going to be able to work on their cars and make them better early. So typically we see the winner start really high up at this type of racetrack, but with no qualifying and so many good cars, it's just one of those weeks where I don't think we're going to have that massive amount of cautions, and there's going to be a lot of stuff we can take advantage of.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think there'll be fewer cautions this year. And when that happens, these races become more predictable when there's fewer cautions. So the good guys do tend to win out in the end. One guy last year that lost out because of all these cautions was Ricky Stenhouse Jr. He had an incredibly fast car. He drove from the back to 3rd place at the end of stage 1. And then just with all the cautions in stage 2 and stage 3, he kept getting shuffled out on those restarts, but he had one of the best long run speed cars, was inside the top 5 in 10 lap average, and would have been inside the top 5 had they in green flag speed in the race, had they not had all these different cautions. So I think it makes it very predictable. And on that note, I live bet Ricky Stenhouse 300-1 last year at the start of the race when I saw him flying through the field. If that happens again this year, we can find a driver like that, and then there'll be fewer cautions. I think live betting is a really, really good spot, especially without practice, especially without qualifying this weekend, to take advantage of. But we also got to do some pre-race bets, not just some live betting. So it is time to dive into our bets. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around Auto Club Speedway. That's 4 turns fast around the track. 1 pick from Stevie, 1 pick from me per turn. So we've taken the green flag, and it's time to dive into turn 1. Okay, Stevie, let's kick it off here. Start us off with your turn 1 pick.
I mean, one of the fastest cars last year was Eric Jones, no doubt. This is the type of racetrack where he's good. I mean, he had a Darlington win. So we're going to go Eric Jones, top 5, plus 375 over there on BetMGM. First in green flag speed last year, like I mentioned, 2 top 5 finishes on high tire wear intermediate tracks last year, 1 Darlington late in 2022. He's really good at Darlington and Auto Club. He struggles at Homestead. Okay, it's a different type of racetrack, but it's still a high tire wear racetrack. So I think this is a fantastic spot for us to jump on Eric Jones early. I've seen a lot of people talking about his top 10s. I've seen a lot of people betting him outright. I'm perfectly okay with taking shots on top 10s and betting him outright. I like these odds. I like the value here at plus 375 for a top 5. I think he's going to have a top 5 speed. I think this is a team that's really going to swing for the fences to start the year with Jimmy Johnson coming in, Richard Petty kind of going out. So Eric Jones, top 5, plus 375 is my turn 1 pick this week.
Yeah, I like it. I actually am also going to go with Eric Jones for my turn 1 pick. Mine is just a lean. I'm going to lean on Eric Jones here. So I haven't made it an official bet, but I'm going to take Eric Jones top 3 plus 800 as the pick I'm leaning towards. And you mentioned top 5, top 3 outright, top 10. I tend to like these upside bets more with Eric Jones. So the top 5, top 3 outright more than the top 10, just because he does have enough downside. He's an aggressive driver. He's made some mistakes. He's had a lack of reliability, especially with legacy / petty GMS. So I think I tend to lean more towards the upside here, which is why I look at top 5 or top 3 or even the outright on Eric Jones. Last year, third in in the race, fastest average green flag speed, like you mentioned. He's always solid at Darlington, but he does have his ups and downs at the other high tire wear tracks. Obviously, Chicagoland, he did have a couple top 10s, but Homestead, he's been pretty bad there. He's only had one top 10 at Homestead in his career, and Atlanta was not so great for him either. So kind of a mixed bag with Eric Jones at these high tire wear tracks, but that absolutely means there's a lot of upside because he has 2 wins at Darlington, that third place here. So certainly plenty of upside for Eric Jones. So my model has plus 725 as fair value, which plus 800 would mean value on terms of this bet. But I am a little concerned about maybe Ford or Toyota making some gains compared to last year, since Eric Jones is in this Chevy. Ford has the new nose, so is that going to give them some more aero advantage in the race? Toyota last year had some overheating issues, so if they don't have those issues, they'll make gains compared to last year. So right now, that's why I'm just leaning Eric Jones top 3 plus 800, but I would take this if it drops to around plus 850. So Stevie, I think you and I right there together with Eric Jones in turn 1. That means time to head into turn 2. All right, Stevie, we're going into turn 2 now, coming through the corner. Give us your turn 2 pick.
Really quick, not to backtrack too much, but Eric Jones, he finished 37th at the Daytona 500. So if qualifying does get rained out, he's going to move way back. We might see these odds for a top 3 move to like plus 1,000. So one of those be patient kind of things. My turn 2 pick this week is Martin Truex Jr. outright. He's plus 1,200 over there on BetMGM. Really like this 12-1 line for him. We talked about him a lot on the preview show. We talked about him a lot, at Daytona 500. I think we're both kind of high on Martin Truex Jr. just in general. This is a guy when we add in like Atlanta and Chicagoland, one of the best top 5s in 6 of the last 9 races at Chicagoland and old Atlanta. So when we're looking at D-shaped ovals that have speed and tire wear, this guy was one of the fastest guys. So the fact that we're getting him at 12-1 because he struggled last year is huge. Top 3 car in speed last year on high tire wear tracks, even with the struggles that they had. So he's above average when it comes to maintaining his tires and being fast. Martin Truex Jr. is someone that you might pass him early in a run, but if you get like a 30 or 40 lap run, him and Kevin Harvick are so good at maintaining their tires and just making these laps and speeds up, as the longer run goes. So Martin Truex Jr. 12-1, BetMGM, really like this for him this week.
Yeah, one of the metrics I use is like a track type quality or track type driver rating I will look at. And looking at the high tire wear tracks, he has the highest type driver rating over the last 8 incident-free races for each driver. So definitely can get on board there with Martin Truex Jr. at plus 1,200 at BetMGM. I'm also going to have a lean. Don't worry, I'll have some real actual picks here in turns 3 and 4, but I'm going to lean again here in turn 2, and I'm going to give a lean on Alex Bowman at 22-1. And if you listened at the top, I was really glad that Stevie mentioned all of these different high tire wear tracks, because Bowman's sneaky incredible, like at these high wear tracks of all shapes and all sizes in his career. He has a win at Auto Club, which of course is the track we're going to be at this weekend. He has a win at Chicagoland, the 1.5 mile high wear oval that NASCAR stopped running at a few years ago. He has a win at Richmond, another high tire wear track, but it's only a 3/4 mile D-shaped oval. But again, D-shaped oval. He has a win at Martinsville, and that was the year where he came through the field and tire wear came into play, and he passed Denny Hamlin late because he was able to manage his tire wear better. Last year, he got that win at Las Vegas. That's getting kind of high tire wear, especially in the warmer weather there. Dover hasn't been repaved in forever. He's got a win there. That can have some wear. They fall off 7, 8, 9 miles an hour over the long run at Dover as well. So he's kind of sneaky at these high wear tracks. And now he gets crew chief Blake Harris, who helped Michael McDowell have a career year last year, including 2 top 10s at Darlington. 2 top 10s at Darlington. You would never expect that for a front row motorsports car. But Blake Harris helped get that done. And as we've talked about on previous episodes, I mean, Blake Harris is a guy I'm very high on because he's made teams better, drivers and teams better every stop he has been, whether an engineer, car chief, or crew chief. So we saw, I mean, the improvements that Bowman made in the clash from that first practice session to the second and third, and then in the race. So they do seem to be working really well together. And my model has 24-1 as fair value, but it can't really factor in the Blake Harris intangible. So I may bite at 22-1, but I'm just kind of waiting to see if qualifying is rained out or not. If it's rained out, unfortunately, that value is probably going to go away because he starts 5th under the formula. So I may end up biting early anyway. We'll just kind of have to wait and see, but I'm leaning Alex Bowman for my turn 2 pick. Any thoughts there, Stevie?
No, I like it a lot. I don't think people realize just how good Blake Harris is. Michael McDowell's a good race car driver, and he made him a great race car driver. So, Blake Harris is someone that I'm very high on. Alex Bowman is great on these types of tracks. So, again, we keep talking about high tire wear and maintaining speed. It's huge. It's something that we're going to talk about, all the rest of the show. So buckle in. We got a couple more turns to go.
That's right. We're going down the back straightaway, and now it's time to dive into turn 3. All right, heading into turn 3, Stevie. I find this pick I know you have coming up here interesting, so why don't you give it to us?
I mean, we're in turn 3, right? So we got to go to the 3.
That's right.
Austin Dillon, top 10, plus 170. 3 top 10 finishes on high tire wear intermediate tracks last season. Second here. It wasn't really a second, but we'll take it. 4th at Homestead in 2022. 11.4 average finish over the last 5 Auto Club races. This line might move a little bit in our favor if qualifying gets rained out on Saturday. So that's something to kind of pay attention to. For some reason, if the weather does change, Austin Dillon's running the Xfinity race on Saturday. And I mean, getting extra seat time at a high tire wear track is always good rhythm wise, especially if we're not going to get practice or qualifying for the Cup Series. So if they do get a little break and they're able to get the Xfinity race in, Saturday night, I think it's huge for a guy like Austin Dillon, top 10. I mean, this is good value for me. I have this at like plus 140. So getting a little bit of value for Austin Dillon, top 10. And I mean, looking at all the data, I think a top 10 is definitely within reach. I would probably bet this down to like plus 140. So I like Austin Dillon, top 10 at plus 170 for my turn 3 pick in the 3 car.
Yeah, this is an interesting one for me because my model doesn't quite show value here, but like you said, this line may move in our favor. So possibly a good spot to be patient with. And I also think my model could just be too low here. I mean, you are right. He got second here last year, although he did have a car in the mid-teens probably in terms of his quality, but with all those cautions and restarts, he did end up finishing second. You mentioned 4th at Homestead, the 11.4 average finish. All of those things make me think possibly my model is too low, and that's going to happen. Sometimes my model will be too high. Sometimes my model will be too low. So I do think I would end up possibly taking this if the line moves in our favor. For my turn 3 pick, I've already made this bet. I'm going to go William Byron top Chevy at plus 750. I'm going to throw a full unit on this one. Byron did have one of the best cars here last year. Maybe second only to Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick was dominating the race and then blew a tire. And unfortunately, Byron could not avoid Reddick on that blown tire incident and crashed out as well. So very strong car here last year. He's also solid at Darlington and Homestead. He may not have had some of the finishes that we want, but in terms of his speed, he was right there. And of course, Joey Logano punted Byron out of the way for the win in the first Darlington race last year. So he was right there at some of these other high tire wear tracks as well. He previously has a win at Homestead, so he can get it done at these high tire wear tracks. And one thing I like about taking the top Chevy angle here is we avoid potential Ford or Toyota improvements. So if they've made gains on Chevy at this particular track compared to last year, then Byron may not be quite like the winning threat that he was last year just at this particular track. He obviously still could be, but if Ford and Toyota make improvements, we avoid that by taking top Chevy. My model has plus 675 as fair value, so plus 750 I definitely like on William Byron for a unit here.
I'm with you on this one. I like William Byron a lot. I'm worried a little bit about the disadvantage he's going to have starting position wise if qualifying does get rained out. But if we're looking at just overall speed, he was the second fastest car on high tire wear intermediate tracks last year. So Logano was first, Byron was second, Truex was third. Larson was fifth as the next best Chevy, with Tyler Reddick as seventh. So there's a nice little gap that William Byron was, man, it was Reddick, right? Reddick blew a tire and Byron hit him. I mean, Chevy looked so good last year at this racetrack. So I think Chevy's going to be good. I'm really interested to see how Ford does, but Toyota I think is going to be good as well. But I like your idea of, hey, we don't have to worry about, betting Byron to win the race and just take him as top Chevy here at plus 750.
Yeah, that I agree with that. And I didn't even have that stat about the high tire wear intermediates. So that makes me feel even better. So thank you for that, Stevie. All right, we're rolling through turn 3. Time to go into turn 4. All right, Stevie, we're coming through turn 4. We're going to hit the start finish line here soon. But before we do that, you have to give us our turn 4 pick.
I'm dropping the hammer on this one. I love this spot. Daniel Suarez over Bubba Wallace at even money. Like, I ran everything with my model and the data and everything with this, and like everything I have says Daniel Suarez should be like minus 125 here. So getting him at even like money just seems like an insane value. Top 3 finishes or top 10 finishes 3 times on the 4 higher wear tracks compared to only 1 for Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace has been struggling big time at Auto Club throughout his career. Best finish is 19th. Suarez has finished 18th or better in 5 straight races at Auto Club. Different car. I get it. It's still a really tough racetrack on drivers. So if we're going to see this type of speed for Suarez and Bubba's going to struggle, like, we have to take advantage of this one. This is one that I'm not waiting. I'm not being patient on this one. I'm jumping on this one really soon. So Suarez over Wallace plus 100. Again, I really could argue Suarez being like minus 125 and still wanting to bet this matchup.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. My model has Suarez as a clear favorite on this one. And if we look at track quality, which is a metric I use, which normalizes to a driver's equipment, Bubba Wallace has a negative 20% track quality rating here at this track. So that is just way below Suarez, who's slightly above neutral here. So I'm with you there. They both struggled last year for various reasons. Suarez just didn't quite have the speed. And obviously Toyota had their overheating issues. But overall, by and large, instead of just looking at a 1 race sample from last year, I think if we look at their career history at this track, I do give the edge to Daniel Suarez here. For my turn 4 pick, I know you like this one, Stevie. I'm going to take Denny Hamlin minus 114 over Chase Elliott. I already have, again, made this bet. So I'm going to win 1 unit here if Hamlin finishes ahead of Chase Elliott. Hamlin is the second most likely driver to win in my model, and he's been super consistent at the high wear tracks. Elliott, a little bit less so. He hasn't had the consistency of finishes and the consistency of speed that Denny Hamlin has had. And I mean, you mentioned the Chevys as far as like green flag speed at these intermediate tracks. You didn't even mention Chase Elliott because he's so far down there at these high speed, high wear intermediate tracks. Now, Elliott did have a little bit better car last year. He was kind of in contention for the win late after all the restarts when teammate Kyle Larson blocked him, I guess, if you will, and caused Elliott to wreck. But that was partially because of the Toyota overheating issues. And, JGR Toyota made all of those gains in the second half of the year, and Hamlin was so much stronger in the second half of the year. And even with Toyota overheating issues last year, Hamlin still had a top 10 green flag speed and a top 10 average running position in last year's race. He ended up finishing outside the top 10, but I think that was just a product of a lot of late race restarts as well. If Toyota has no overheating issues, and I don't think they will because they got that worked out basically after that race, I think it's for sure that Hamlin has a better car than Elliott. I have Hamlin almost double the win probability of Chase Elliott here, so I really like Hamlin minus 114 over Chase Elliott.
Again, I wish we could get some books to say, hey, bet a top 5 no, because I mean, I do not like Chase Elliott. He was 26th in green flag speed here last year, where Hamlin was 7th. He was 14th in rankings as far as intermediate high tire wear tracks, where Denny was 4th. So I love that you found this one. I jumped on this last night when I was typing in my information for our preview for the pod. So I'm with you 100% on this one. This is one, like, I almost messaged you and been like, all right, I know we like to go big on our victory lane, but I almost messaged you and say, let's take this as our victory lane pick this week because I like this bet just as much as you do. So I think if no issues happen, Hamlin beats Elliott here at a high percentage of the time.
Yeah, and I will say 26 was a little misleading there for Chase Elliott. He had a really good car. I think he had an incident earlier mid-race and then came back from a lap down. And then he also had that Larson incident, which after running the last several laps at like a slow speed, it's a really misleading on his average green flag speed. I do think he had a top 10 or even better car. I think he actually had a better car than Hamlin last year just because of the overheating issues for Toyota. But by and large, you remove those overheating issues, you remove Elliott's incidents. I still think Hamlin is the favorite in this matchup, but absolutely, I think this is a fantastic head-to-head matchup, and I'm happy to side with Denny Hamlin here. So we've made it through a lap at Auto Club Speedway, took the checkered flag, time to head to victory lane. Stevie, give us our victory lane pick for this week.
I mean, we got some confetti with Stenhouse, right? Shout out to Christy Walsh in the Action Network article saying bet Stenhouse. So we got some confetti.
I just have to say we crushed that article because you had Cody Ware on the lead lap and I had Christopher Bell top Toyota, and of course Christy 40-1 on Stenhouse. So make sure you're checking out our articles as well over on Action Network. But go ahead with that thought. I just want to say we slayed that article.
Hey, listen, we did something right because we didn't end up in victory lane with Ryan Blaney. He got turned. He was super fast. He had one of the best pushing cars. So I still really liked that bet last week. But we're going to go back to another outright this week for the victory lane pick, and that's Tyler Reddick at 12-1. I like this a lot. We talked about it last night. Top 7 in speed in 3 of the 4 higher intermediate tire wear tracks last year. Really fast at Old Atlanta and pretty much everything that he drove there. So I mean, comping that, I don't know if he ran at Chicagoland in the Cup Series, but I know looking back at Atlanta that he's going to be good here. So flat tire, he was one of the best cars, if not the best car last year. Let's just say, like, it was when we were still Goodyear and NASCAR, and these teams were still kind of working out these tire pressures. And he had 80 something laps led. He dominated the race and got a flat tire, cost him the win. So I mean, Toyota finished the 2022 season with a ton of speed on intermediate tracks, and I think that we're not going to see a downgrade here for Tyler Reddick going into the Toyota camp. I think we're going to potentially see an upgrade. Not saying that RCR is taking a step back, but we saw Toyota take a huge step at the end of last year, and if that continues, we're getting Tyler Reddick at 12-1, where in a month from now, this bet would probably be 8-1.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like Bubba Wallace was a threat to win at every intermediate in the second half of the year. Michigan, Vegas, Kansas. So absolutely, Toyota took leaps and bounds forward. And now Tyler Reddick is Bubba Wallace's teammate at 2311 Racing. Tyler Reddick is actually third in my model to win. I took him 15-1 earlier in the week, and that got bet down to 12-1, but I'm still showing significant value at 12-1. So I'm right there with you. I mean, he was the dominant car last year at Auto Club Speedway in that RCR car. Now with 2311, and like you said, I don't think it's necessarily a downgrade. It could even be an upgrade. At worst, it's a lateral move. But if he was the dominant car last year and made a lateral move, he could still be the dominant car this year at Auto Club. So Tyler Reddick, 12-1, our victory lane pick. And that is going to do it for us. Thank you for listening to the Pala Casino 400 episode of Running Hot, the all-new motorsports betting podcast from Action Network. We'll be back this time next week to talk betting for the Pennzoil 400 at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Last year's race came down to a green-white checkered finish, so hopefully we get another exciting race in Las Vegas. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you back here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.